Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Exceptional Results Now. We are super excited to have you back with us today. I am your host, Rasha. I am the managing partner and president of Exceptional Results. And we are so excited to have you here with us today as we continue to talk about what it is that we do and our focus for today's episode. Exceptional Results is a coaching and consulting service that focuses on helping leaders become exceptional and allowing those with a growth mindset to continue to grow and develop in their own way, authentically. And that is by aligning people with profit, purpose, and planet to authentically lead and make an impactful change. I am super excited to have today our founder and CEO, the master coach himself, Jason, as we continue to talk about the importance of having your own vision and understanding the mission and creating your own avatar, knowing your client. There is a great importance in understanding what it is that you want to offer and having a clear vision of your company and what you would like to offer the world. And at the same time, understanding who your client is so you can target that client and figure out how and what is the best way to serve that client. And Jason, I would like for you to tell us a little bit more about that and how we could write down and come up with a clear way of identifying what our vision is and what our mission is and aligning that with the clients that we want to serve.
Well, thank you, Rasha. And as always, I am very grateful to have you and be able to have this show with you. And for everyone out there, one additional thing that I'd like to say for Exceptional Results Now going into 2021 is how important it is to understand that the mission and plan that you have going forward is something that not only resonates with you internally, but is something that resonates externally to the people that you are going to be targeting as your customers. So, with that being said, the opportunity this week that we're talking about is in terms of really understanding the person that you want to work with. And for a lot of people, they call this your avatar, your ideal client.
Mhm.
I like to, really explain this as the person that you think is going to be the easiest person for you to work with, but is actually the person with the biggest challenge and opportunity. So, one of the mistakes that is often made, and I'm going to start with the mistake simply because in the marketplace, you hear a lot of people talk about how you identify and create your ideal customer. And I think one of the things that we fail to recognize is that we who are in business, entrepreneurs, business leaders, executives, we are trying to find a problem that we can fix. And that is how we are successful in business. We're not
Mhm.
successful in business by working with someone that is easy for us to work with. We like to think that that makes life easy for us. And yeah, it does. But the truth is, we'll be very quickly out of business if we're simply working with people who like to work with us. Because if they
Mhm.
don't have a problem, the truth is, why do they need you?
Mhm.
So the first thing is really to identify what are the problems in the marketplace that you can really solve. And you have to do that by asking people what their problems are. You can't necessarily solve a problem if you don't know what it is. That's the first thing. But the second thing is you can't really find out who your ideal customer is unless you start asking people what they're struggling with and whether or not it's really something that you can figure out the problem and solve it. Now, that
Mhm.
being said, one of the mistakes that we also make in terms of identifying our ideal customer is really looking inside ourselves and trying to figure out what is it that we're really good at.
Mhm.
And we look at our talents and we look at our skills and we look at our school training and we look at the things that we've done in our life, and we limit ourselves to those things. So you mentioned that one of the things that Exceptional Results now focuses on is growth mindset. And
Yep.
that is one of the really important things to think about when you're looking at solving a problem. Has anybody solved this problem before? Why
Mhm.
does this problem exist? Oftentimes, we miss the opportunity to take on a challenge
Mhm.
because we ourselves are afraid that we can't solve that challenge. So we look for challenges that we already know the answer to, not
Mhm.
recognizing that part of the greatest opportunity that we're given as entrepreneurs and business people is to try and solve challenges that nobody has ever been able to figure out. So when you're identifying your ideal customer, one of the things you might want to look for in that ideal customer is
Mhm.
somebody who's got a challenge that
Right.
nobody's ever been able to figure out.
Mhm.
And that is the opportunity. So when we look at that, how do you define a challenge that
Mhm.
nobody's ever figured out?
Mhm.
And that is obviously one of the individual ways to look at the marketplace and look at your ideal customer is, let's say, let's use real estate as an example. Somebody who has been buying and flipping residential homes, 1 to 4 family homes, they have a skill set that they understand. But if the challenge with an ideal client is someone who wants to build community shelters for disadvantaged people, who may or may not have ever owned a home, may not even be able to afford rent. What is the opportunity? What is
Mhm.
the challenge that nobody has figured out up to this point that that person may be able to
Mhm.
identify?
Mhm.
So I'm giving an idea, for any real estate developers out there in terms of what is the, unsolved challenge in the low income homeless marketplace that we might be able to look at as an
Mhm.
opportunity to solve. Now, that being said, who is your ideal customer in that particular scenario? Is it the end user, or is it a nonprofit? Is it the government? Where is the buyer in this particular challenge? So I'm
Mhm.
using this particular example simply because obviously, for anyone who has listened to our past podcasts or anyone who's familiar with our website or myself personally, that my primary mission in life is to end hunger and homelessness on this planet. So let's look at it from the standpoint that it's the government. And
Mhm.
the local government has made it something of importance to try and solve this issue of homelessness within their particular local community. How are they going about this? Are they already partnering with local developers? Do they have a budget of what they can spend, for local developers to fix up buildings? Are they, working with other organizations that already have buildings and they're just placing people into these buildings? What is the focus for the end user? Are these people who, have had, situations of mental illness, or they've been incarcerated, and these
Yeah.
are, halfway homes and step up, um, communities, for to help them to get back on their feet. So identifying within the government what their business model is the first challenge. But let's put a name to this government identity that's going to be your ideal customer. Okay. Now, we have certain loan programs that people call Sally and Freddie and Fannie, but do we have a homeless program? And let's use a very common, comfortable name like George. So
Mhm.
George is that part of the government that handles homeless services. And George is in a certain location in government that deals with economics and probably is close to working with employers in terms of long-term disadvantaged people and trying to get them jobs and get them off of government services and into the workforce. Obviously, George probably is familiar with people who are getting public assistance and some type of credit for not only their housing, but their income to be able to pay for food and supplies. George obviously has a lot of familiarity with different nonprofits that serve this community. George probably also is focused on community affairs and community development and has a lot to do with how the public image of the government looks in terms of really trying to help people rather than restricting people or any of the other civil servant areas in terms of,
Mhm.
fire, police, garbage, EMS, corrections, general administration. So George really separates himself from all of these other civil servant areas of labor that are specialized in terms of what they do to provide services for the individual residents of the city. And George is looking more in terms of a community model of how the government gets out into the communities and presents itself in a way that is positive and showing that the least among us could be safe and protected.
Yeah.
Okay. But
Mm.
George is obviously not that successful because otherwise there wouldn't be issues of homelessness and hunger in the community. So,
Right.
what's George's number one problem? What's George's number one problem? George's number one problem is the fact that George isn't effective in his
Mhm.
communication to
Mhm.
those residents who are homeless and hungry. They don't necessarily trust George. They don't see George as being really on their side. Why not? Well, it could be that past Georges haven't really been helpful and other areas of the government haven't really been helpful. And probably the miscommunication in terms of the different areas of government and how that end user has been treated by the quote unquote government overall,
Mhm.
George is often confused with other areas of government. So we have to then look at George's problem and understand that, first of all, George needs to be very clearly and succinctly, specifically identified for what George does and what separates George from every other aspect of government. So we have
And
to know. Go ahead.
apologies. But so this would be where George could clearly state what his mission is and translate that in words that his particular target, people that he is trying to serve, would clearly understand what he stands for and what makes him different from previous existing organizations that may have failed them, and at the same time see to it that his vision is clear enough and it's reaching enough people that he actually wants to serve.
That's
Correct?
exactly right, Rasha. And the way to think about it is that George has to be willing to give 10 times as much as he was willing to give before.
Mhm.
So George
And why?
has to look, say that again.
Right? And why would that be important that he would give 10 times as much more?
Well, the first thing is you're dealing with a problem
Mhm.
that people look at George as not being honest
Mm.
or really aligned with them. That George is really going to be a safe and valuable resource for these
Mhm.
people. So he has to give 10 times as much to make people feel his particular customers
Right.
that he is safe and trustworthy. So that's the first thing, is that George has to look at his challenge as an opportunity to magnify himself in such a
Make a
way. Yeah, that's
mm,
exactly right. He has to, look at his opportunity as one in which separating himself from the rest of his government affiliates and government agencies that, also have names, as being very, very different for this
mm,
particular community that George serves. In addition to that, is George also has an opportunity that we could look at as a responsibility in terms of his personal mission to make sure that all of these other government identities, as well as the individual residents of the community,
mm,
to be educated on his mission and his purpose, so that now they can support George in helping him with his ideal customer.
mhm, mhm,
So, for a developer or a real estate owner who wants to work with George and recognizes that George is their ideal target, they have to see what George's vision is and see what George's challenges are, and how can they help George be 10 times more powerful to his community.
mhm,
So if I'm a real estate developer looking at low income housing and helping people who are homeless, and George is my ideal customer, I want to position George in terms of being so effective in attracting the people that he works with and the challenges that George has. I want to be able to solve that problem for George, so that George looks at me and George says, "You're the only person that I want to work with. Jason,
mhm,
I've been looking for you forever. I love your story. I love your mission, and your message resonates with me." So
mhm,
that if I'm the developer and I want to work with George, I'm thinking about how am I communicating with George on his values and his
mhm,
needs and his concerns, and
mhm.
how do I help George in a way that I'm magnifying those things to his target audience, so
Right.
that his life becomes that much easier. So
Mhm,
when we're designing our client avatar, that's one of the things we really, really need to think about, is how are we identifying our specific ideal client in a way that we're helping them with what it is that they need to be successful with. And this
mhm,
is the reality of your growth mindset and your creativity, because it doesn't matter what you've done in your past. That's just a track record that you've done with other things. George represents an opportunity to create a whole new track record. And then as you develop your client avatar even more, the reality is George may change over time, because as you solve
right.
some of George's problems, George now starts to look at other areas of interest. And how
Mhm,
can you continue to work with George? And then maybe you're actually developing a second client avatar. Because as George begins to change, you realize that there are other areas of, either real estate or of government that you can work on. Now, let's look at that and let's say, okay, you start solving George's problems and you become very successful at developing low income housing that helps George and helps his audience, and puts you in this great position of being able to solve this huge problem in the marketplace.
mhm,
However, it presents a new challenge. And
mhm,
that new challenge is that your end users now, as they become more comfortable and confident with their situation, they're moving out. They're looking for new
mhm,
places for themselves. They're looking for better jobs. They're looking to go up the ladder. And as you're, bringing those customers out of that situation, they're going to need better housing. They're going to
mhm,
need, their family might grow. They might decide that they need to move somewhere else. So there are all of these new services that George may not necessarily be able to provide. And the truth is, there may not be anybody in government, but there might be nonprofits or for-profit agencies that can help these people. And
Right.
how do you want to work with those particular targets on developing a solution for these people that doesn't necessarily exist in the marketplace?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's not to say that there aren't companies and individuals out there already doing some type of service. But the
Mhm.
problem may be that they have used a model that is well over several decades old. They haven't chosen to upgrade it. And the truth is that with, modern technology and all of these different resources and the speed of things, they haven't been able to not only keep up, but transform their business to really accommodate the way in which people and the world and technology and the planet is going. So
Mhm.
therefore, because they're not aligned in terms of people and planet or purpose, they can't be profitable. And
Right.
so there's an opportunity for you. How do you solve that problem in a way that either you can help those organizations be profitable, or you can create a new organization to be profitable with
Mhm.
yourself, with your
Mhm.
company?
Mhm.
So going back to our client avatar, one of the big things that is taught now is how you write down the demographics of the ideal customer and the psychographics of the ideal customer, which is true. These are things that are valuable in terms of being able to identify somebody more effectively, where they are on social media. What are the
Right.
things that they like to buy in terms of their materialistic habits? What are the things that they like to buy in terms of their needs for status, or their needs for spirituality, or their needs for health, or their needs for emotional support? So there are these different areas of people's lives that you can now start to look at and say, okay, let's go back to George and let's think about, what does George need in terms of status and accomplishment? Well, George obviously is a part of government. And within government, George obviously needs to be more recognized. So what is important to George in terms of being recognized? Where does he hang out? What types of social places might George hang out? What types of places online might George hang out? What types of fundraisers would you see George at? What types of theaters and different types of artistic performance, and what types of hobbies might George have? Where would George socialize? What's important to George? Is George an intellectual? Is George an athlete? Is George an artist? Is George more scientific or
Mhm.
more creative? You know, let's get into the mind of the type of person that would be focused on helping those less fortunate and really dealing with the administrative aspects of getting people through a systematic process of government to getting services and being able to improve their lives through the government.
Mhm.
It's not an easy program. That's the first
Right.
thing. Because again, the government has all sorts of checks and balances, and they need applications, and they need all sorts of internal quote unquote administration and accountability, which, by the way, is neither administrative nor accountable,
Mhm.
because all they do is they collect this information on people and they basically use it in reporting, but they
Mhm.
don't use it to actually say, okay, how are we improving this area of government to the
Mhm.
extent that we have less and less people in this situation? So they're not looking at that data and saying, okay, if we had 60,000, homeless people last year go through our services, how do we get, 20,000 of those people not to be
Yeah.
homeless anymore?
Right.
Okay. How do we create a plan, a mission, a primary mission that within 5 years, we're going to have not only all of the 60,000 people that have gone through our system off of any type of services. But we're also going to prevent, more than 5%. And we want that number, to come down over the next 5 years. But we're not going to let more than 5% on an annual basis of that number come onto. We're going to create systems and programs that allow them to very quickly be redirected in ways that they can be empowered and get out of the situation before they're ever really in it. Because the administration and the process in and of itself for George's end user is probably very, very imposing and intimidating and defeating.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
therefore the psychology of the individual is that they probably don't even want to accept these services if they don't have to, but they have no
Mm-hmm.
choice. And how are we empowering them to use those services in a way that they can turn around and become better? Okay.
See, and now
So
about having a clear mission in place that is translated to Georgia's clients and everyone that would benefit from the program, that's aligned with a clear business plan, like we talked about in our last episode, so that when it comes to execution and deciding what would be the next step or what would be the best decision moving forward, you would go back to the mission statement and you would review your business plan and see that it is aligned in a way that would best service Georgia's clients or any potential clients for that matter that you're still trying to reach and allow into the program so you can continue to serve and reach more people. But if you go in with an unclear mission and then you don't have a business plan to support that mission, you're already going in, which is very interesting choice of words that you just used, is defeated. Would go in defeated. And so so were the people that you were trying to service that would greatly benefit from a great program like that. Would they are going to feel the same way because that's essentially the message that you've already sent out without having to say those words.
that's right.
Defeat.
That's right,
Um,
Rasha.
you want to make sure that you prevent that. So I really appreciate that you use that word in particular because unfortunately that's what happens in situations like that.
Yeah, and bringing it back to the point of the client avatar and really understanding, identifying your customer in terms of, every aspect about them, but also what is the message that you want to have when you're in front of your ideal client, your avatar. This is where we have to go back to your mission and your story.
Mhm.
So in our past two episodes, our first episode, we talked about the primary mission and plan and really coming up with your primary mission and plan. And now you have to see how your primary mission and your vision
Mhm.
aligns with George's primary mission. And does
Mhm.
George even have a primary mission? And that might be part of the opportunity, is to learn from George. Does
Mhm.
George even have a primary mission? Because if George doesn't, you have an opportunity to share your primary mission with
Yeah.
George and ask George, how can we do this together? That's the
Mhm.
first great opportunity. But the second, which is going back to last week in terms of your plan and your, aligning your mission through your story. And remember, we talked about your story. So,
Yes.
so now it's a matter of, you have a chance to talk to George, and you want to find out everything you can about George in terms of what George's problem is with George's customer. And then you want to be able to say, hey, George, here's my story. And this is my vision and my mission. And this is, why it's important to me based on my story. I'd love to understand your story. I'd love to understand your mission.
Mhm.
And based on my story and your mission and my mission, how can we solve this problem in a way that benefits your, customers and benefits you and me in the process? Because at the end of the day, you're not just winning for you and George, you're winning for George's customers, and you're winning for the planet. You're winning for the overall idea of being to never have this problem exist in the future. Now we've chosen this, very challenging but heartwarming topic of ending homelessness, simply
Mhm.
because obviously it's my,
Right.
personal critical mission. But let's
Yeah.
look at it from the bigger picture of impact. Again, one of the things about, our coaches at Exceptional Results Now is that we focus on impact and aligning people and planet for, profit and purpose. Well, what does that mean? What that means is that when you are a coach and you are working with any client in our organization and you're trying to help them with whatever their problem is, you're looking at their customers. You're looking at their customers' customers. You're looking at the impact that you're creating with your client that's going to create an impact on their entire supply chain of their customers and how their customers' communities are impacted, because your goal is to have this impact on the planet that your
Mhm.
client is the leader of.
Exactly.
And so therefore, going back to George, if our goal is for George to have this incredible impact on his community that's impacting the planet positively, where we're solving this problem of homelessness in a way that it no longer exists for future generations.
Mhm.
And George is getting recognition for that. We helped create a more successful George, that George can now go to other communities and get the same job in other city governments and state governments and federal governments. And he can go up the supply chain of being able to solve this problem.
Mhm.
Now, whether George works with us or not, we help George to solve this problem. But the
Mhm.
reality is that more than likely, George is always going to reach back and say, hey, you guys helped me solve this problem in this community. Now I've got a bigger one.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
need your help. Can you help me here?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's your choice, obviously, whether you want to go with George in that direction. And
Mhm.
and obviously, I look at it from, why would you ever not want to go with George
Right.
in that direction?
Right.
But for some people, it's kind of like, well, no, I want to solve it on just this level, and that's fine. That's fine if that's what you feel is, your end goal and your mission is just to work at a certain level. There's nothing wrong with that. But I again, because we're a growth mindset organization, and I always try to look at the highest level of achievement, and how do we get George there, and how do we make George not only the dominant force at that level, but the recognized force that this is going to be solved because of George.
Mhm.
And if George eventually doesn't have a job because we've
Mhm.
solved homelessness on this planet, then obviously we've created a new problem for George, which is he has to figure out a whole new problem to solve. And how exciting is that, to be able
Absolutely.
to say that we solved George's problem to the
Yes.
level that the entire planet is rid of this problem.
It's wiped
Now,
out.
now, if you could do that in a lifetime, obviously that in itself is an amazing feat.
Yeah.
If you
Oh
do
my.
it over and over in a lifetime,
Yeah.
well, again, that's what we're looking for, in our leadership. And that's what we're always trying to drive our leaders to understand, is that,
Exactly.
the more that we solve these problems at the highest level, is the more successful the impact we've created for the entire
Mhm.
planet. So going back to the ideal client, the avatar, what you should be looking for more than all the other descriptions that people talk about is the problem that your ideal client has that you want to be responsible for solving with them. And
Mhm.
that's where you've got to listen to them and
Yes.
understand that every client is different. Every individual there, there's only so many Georges in the world, first of all. Okay. And that's okay. But they could have a different name. It could be a Lizette, who has a slightly different responsibility and a slightly different problem. And part of Lizette's problem is Lizette hasn't looked at how big her problem really is. And so, therefore, you have an opportunity to explore with Lizette, just the same way you explored with George. What is the real problem? How big could this problem possibly be? And how much opportunity is there to solve this problem in a meaningful way? Because our opportunity as human beings, is to reach the level of exceptionalism within ourselves to be able to solve these problems throughout the planet and create, ideally, our own Eden, where the entire world is solved of all of these human problems, as well as problems of integrating with nature. And now we can focus on the rest of the universe because we
Mm,
don't have the problems that we're struggling with now as human beings, just trying to manage ourselves and manage our relationship with nature. If we can
mhm.
overcome these problems, where we're aligned with nature, we're aligned with each other, and we're aligned on profit and purpose to now look outwards towards the galaxies, towards the other planets, towards other intelligent life throughout the universe. Well, that is what finding your ideal customer is about. Is that
Now
if you go
that is
back,
an excellent idea.
well, thank you. And that's what I want people to think about in terms of their ideal customer is how
Yes.
do they find an ideal customer that has a problem that they can explore together and look at how big this problem could possibly be and how they could solve that huge problem that nobody else wants to solve. And so therefore together that's what makes them an ideal customer. You are now together with that
Mm,
customer focused on how you're going to solve this problem for everybody else so that your customer not only gets the credit with you, but they're now looking at, oh my God, once this problem is solved, what do I
yeah.
do next?
Hmm,
And they
hmm.
turn around and they say, hey guys, I got a new problem. How are we going to
Yes.
solve this one?
And you never get so excited about hearing that, but that is really that's really great because the reality is just as you mentioned starting off, the the bigger the challenge, the greater the impact because there's a great opportunity
Yeah,
that you
that's
can definitely make a difference there, and then you can decide of how much you want to be involved, of you can decide of, okay, well, this is my niche and I want to stick to it and I don't necessarily want to go outside of that. But even if you're not going to continue to have a, a particular service that will serve your avatar, your ideal client, you can at least build within your organization the resource so you can continue to have that connection with your client, and you could have the resources available that where you could direct them to still continuing to getting a service through you, so you never lose that connection with them and you do have a lifetime relationship with that specific client, and you can continue to partner up with other people and other services that could service your client. And in that case, you've built an entire network that goes around a lifetime of service to your avatar. And your business can continue to be of a benefit to the community, um, globally and to the planet. And that's how you'll make a real impact.
That's exactly right. And it leads to, our next episode in which we're going to get into, really how you build your offer to help your client. But I think it's important that we leave everybody this week to understand that your message to your ideal customer always has to be based on how their ideal customer is being served to
Yes.
solve the problem that you have identified that your customer has. So if you think about it from George's case, if what we're doing for George is, we're sitting down with George and we're saying, hey George, you know we recognize that, you're trying to solve this problem of homelessness in this local community. And we have this mission to solve homelessness on the planet. And we want you to understand that um, creating better housing opportunities and better housing resources for your ideal client is not only something that we want to help you do, but we think that if we can do this with you, that we can actually solve this problem of homelessness in this local community where you
Mm,
would no longer have this particular problem to work on. And we know that we may be putting you out of work at this level, but we think that that's a good thing because then you would be going to the next level. And
mm-hmm,
and that's what we want to do is we want to help you go up to the next level and solve it at the next level and the level after that. So let's solve it here once and for all. And that's our
mm-hmm.
message to you is that we really want to solve this problem in a permanent, sustainable way that people in this community are not becoming homeless anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they slip and they fall or they fail or they have any type of problem, that
Right.
causes them to lose their resources, there's a network in place that very quickly catches them and turns them right back around. So
Yes.
they're no longer in this situation as
Mm-hmm.
soon as they get into it. And so
Mm-hmm.
rather than there being a soft landing, it's literally a trampoline or a springboard that,
Yes.
as people fall down, there is no crack. It's literally a rubber band that sends them right back up into the stratosphere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the success we want for you, George.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's amazing. I love it. Thank you very much for that, Jason. And I appreciate everyone tuning in with us today. I hope that you were able to benefit from this episode. If you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to hear what your thoughts are. And Jason, thank you again for sharing your knowledge with us and your experience. We look forward for you to tune in with us next week as we continue to talk about the ideal offer so that you can continue to offer exceptional service in your local business and in your area. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Rasha. And thank you to all our listeners, and have a wonderful rest of your day.